I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mish Shedlock, editor of Mish's Global Economic Trend Analysis on MishTalk.com. Welcome to the show, Mish.
Hey, pleasure to be back on.
4 of the former and current heads of the U.S. Fed are getting together for dinner in New York. What do you think the conversation will be, and will they be patting on themselves on the back saying, good job, boy, good job, girl?
I think it's going to be good job, boys, and good job, girls, if there's any conversation at all. I don't know. I don't speculate on those kinds of things. I actually believe the Fed is clueless. When you look at all these rate hikes that they think they're going to get in, and various people, the first it was 4, then it's 2. I will be surprised if we see 2, and if we do, it's not going to be the reasons why they think. It's not going to be because the U.S. economy is taking off. So it might possibly have something to do with all of these wage hikes that actually I think are just going to cut into jobs and get us into a recession. So I don't know. What they're going to discuss doesn't matter because they don't know anything.
One question I have is what I call spoof stats. In other words, the government says inflation is under control, it's at 2%. But of course, those statistics exclude housing and energy, probably the 2 most expensive things you pay every week.
Well, excluding energy has actually helped the rate rise these days because of falling gasoline prices. But they exclude food, they exclude energy. That's not my big beef. I don't think inflation in food is as high as what people claim. But, health care and rent and excluding houses, and I don't believe they measure rent properly. They ask people how much their house would rent for if they were to rent the house from themselves. Seriously. I mean, what a joke. So, those are the components that are missed, and then of course everyone has a completely different basket. Those that have kids in college are certainly going to see inflation in a completely different way than someone who's retired on fixed income who really is worried, about small increases in food prices and other things. Maybe the, cost of a movie theater, going up, price of services going up, taxi fare going up, those kinds of things. Everyone's basket's different. There's no such thing as this aggregate basket that they try and come up with. And then, of course, the BLS does do some things that are like that I strongly disagree with, and one of them is, well, if the price of beef is up this week, they just assume people are going to buy more chicken, which they probably will do, and so then they substitute chicken for beef when they do their calculations. So it's all just a bunch of hooey. I don't believe they can accurately measure these prices and the amount of energy people spend on this for how literally how corrupt and clueless the index is it's just silly.
What would you have in place of the Fed, or would you just take it out and let the Treasury Board do it?
Let the Treasury Board do it. Well, I certainly would get rid of the Fed, and I would let the market set interest rates. But there's another piece to the puzzle. I would end fractional reserve lending. I wouldn't let banks lend out more money than they have in deposits. And I think, those are the key things that need to be done, and I think we would be fine if we did those things. Unfortunately, there's so much credit extended now that probably couldn't be paid back under those rules, so I don't know how you get from point A to point B, but the logical conclusion to that is there's going to be a currency crisis at some point, which they keep forestalling and making things bigger by attempting to force more credit down the system than it's obvious that the system cannot handle right now.
What about Japan and Europe's experiment with negative interest rates? How's that worked out for them?
It hasn't worked out for them, has it? Japan's desperately trying to get to inflation, hasn't managed to do it yet. At the same time, you've got, and with the negative rates, you had citizens in Japan going out and buying safes to stash their money in. The Bank of Japan actually sent out an explanation note to everyone in the country as to what negative interest rates mean. Just more, propaganda here. And in Europe, when they've tried to do, it hasn't increased. It hasn't done what they said it would do. They have created a bubble in assets, certainly, and we're in one here in the United States as well, without going into negative interest rates. But, the U.S., because we have positive interest rates, a lot of money, a lot of capital, people are flooding into U.S. assets because actually it's so weird that the U.S. has higher interest rates than many other countries, Japan, Europe. So money is flowing in here, helping our asset bubble here. All of this is going to reverse. I don't know where the currency crisis starts, Jim, but actually I suspect either Europe or Japan, but it can literally be anywhere.
When that asset bubble bursts, what's going to be the overall effect?
Another round of credit deflation, and it'll be interesting to see, how central banks respond to that, because what are they going to do? Send interest rates down to negative 1%. They're limited in a way here, because at negative 1%, banks will be paying people for their mortgages in Europe. Europe, unlike the United States, has interest rates tied to something called Euribor, which is the bank-to-bank lending rate. That is slightly negative now on a monthly basis. On a yearly basis, it's still positive. If that rate were to ever get to negative on a yearly basis, and it would do so probably around interest rates around negative 1%, banks would be paying people for the mortgages. Obviously, that would add to financial stress. This is one of the reasons why ECB President Mario Draghi said when they last moved rates lower that we're not likely to go any lower. He didn't say why, but that's the reason. Their hands are tied. There is a physical limit here because of mortgages. So, and it hasn't done them any good. Meanwhile, in the United States, we're still paying banks interest on all these excess reserves. It's just free money to the banks. So we've got an irritating, but a different kind of irritating situation here in the U.S.
In Europe, pension funds, banks, and insurance companies are in deep trouble because they don't make any money on the money they have on deposit. Why have they not switched back to positive interest rates, or at least zero?
Well, I guess you'd have to ask Mario Draghi that. He thinks that that somehow this is supporting the economy. It's not. It certainly hasn't stimulated any lending. So they're wrong. They think it's going to help. It just hasn't helped. I guess that's I don't know how else to explain it.
Well, in no time in history have they had negative interest rates before. Isn't this just one of the most dangerous experiments ever?
It's hard to say what's more dangerous. They keep adding on to this stuff. You know, they try this, so they tried negative interest rates, and everything went gaga. No one thought that was going to happen, and then they oh my gosh, here, nothing happened when interest rates hit negative 0.1%. So let's try negative 0.4%. They now realize they can't go any lower, and they also realize this didn't help. So how are they going to unwind this? If the ECB tomorrow were to come out and say, guess what, we've refunked this, we're going to go back from negative 0.4 to 0% interest rates, guess what would happen? The euro would soar versus the U.S. dollar. They don't want that. They think that a lower euro is good for exports. So here they are, their hands are tied, nothing is working, and they don't know what to do. That's the best explanation right now for what's going on.
So they've driven the car into the wall, it's gone through the wall, but they don't know how to get it back out of the wall.
That's correct.
We'll have more with Mish Shedlock right after the break.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Unbelievable harmony, spectacular performance, the ultimate tribute to the Everly Brothers and Simon and Garfunkel. Bird Dog and the Vintage Electric Band coming to Mission, White Rock, West Vancouver. Buy online and save at ontourtickets.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mish Shedlock. Mish, Goldman-Sachs says you should be shorting gold right now. Why would they say that when everybody else is telling me gold, at least by the end of the year, is going to be the hottest thing out there?
Well, I don't know what is going to be the hottest thing out there. I mean, no one knows where the price of gold is going to be. What we do know is Goldman Sachs' explanation is just a bunch of hooey. Clearly, no one put this idea to the test or even a chart. What Goldman Sachs said, they said two things are in error. First off, they said that data suggests the Fed's going to hike 3 times this year. Well, I dispute that. GDP is sitting here, estimates for first quarter at 0.4%. So, since when has the Fed hiked with GDP struggling here, way under 1%, and another move down is going to send it negative. So to that they say, well, the first quarter is often has these seasonal variations that go on like this, and we recover in the second half of the year. Great. If we recover like we have in the last 2 years, GDP will be 2%. So, since when has the Fed hiked when GDP was 2%, even if you assume we're going to get there, which I don't think we are. So, he was just completely wrong when, and this was the chief commodities traders for Goldman Sachs. He was just completely wrong when he said the data supports 3 hikes. Then the second thing he said, gold goes down when interest rates go up. So I posted a chart of that and showed that it doesn't exactly work that way. Sometimes gold sometimes gold is positively correlated to interest rates, sometimes it's negatively correlated to interest rates, sometimes it's positively correlated with the US dollar, sometimes it's negatively correlated with the US dollar. In other words, there are none of these blanket statements that these people like to make that they did make and are obviously wrong. What gold is correlated to, actually, is belief that central banks have things under control or not. And I think that, and I'm working on a post along those lines that I'm going to have out tonight. And I think central banks are under increasing skepticism, increasing disbelief by the people that they have everything under control. I don't think they have everything under control. I think it was all an illusion that they ever did have things under control. But as long as that illusion lasts, gold tends to go down. And I think we're seeing the end of that illusion.
How come so many of the Fed heads and heads of central banks around the world used to work for Goldman Sachs, an organization that hasn't been very accurate with their predictions? Because I remember about this time last year, they said gold would go down to $750. Never got near that.
Yeah, they're still singing the same tune, and the guys out there saying short gold now here. They should have been saying buy gold when it was $1,000, or near that range, or even 1,100. Instead, they're saying, here, on just a little bounce from the bottom, they're saying short it. Shorting the first move in something off the bottom is usually not a good idea. And, that alone, I mean, these guys just don't understand sentiment. They have no idea what the real driving force behind gold is, and I just kind of explained it a little bit. It's a statement about the belief or disbelief in whether or not there's credit stress or credit stress coming. And I think there's a lot of credit stress coming and a lot of lack of faith about to come in belief that central banks are in control. That is the reason now that I think gold is rising, and for that reason I think gold's going to continue to rise. I can be wrong, but at least I'm not saying things that are easily disproved, like Goldman Sachs. That gold is tied to interest rates. It's an easily disproved statement.
If Goldman Sachs was so sharp, how come they needed billions of dollars to be bailed out?
That's a good question too. So, all of these things. Actually, their advice to, and Zero Hedge has done an admirable job. I wish I had the list of keeping track of all the Goldman Sachs recommendations and when they get stopped out of them or how bad they are. I don't have that list, but I know their advice has generally been pretty bad.
Of course, the banks run lots of ads on TV telling us, come to us for your investment and retirement advice.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. The whole industry is just really a lot of sleaze in it. I guess that's the best word.
And of course, everybody said getting rid of the Glass-Steagall Act that split banks into investment banks and consumer banks. How come they haven't brought it back if it was such a good idea and we've seen the result of not having it?
Well, I think the effect of Glass-Steagall on the financial crisis is way, way, way overstated. That said, I think Glass-Steagall is a good idea. The point behind Glass-Steagall was a separation between divisions of companies so that they don't talk to each other. In other words, it's like a fraud prevention act of some kind, where the LIBOR traders aren't talking to the people, who are, making bets on it, that kind of thing. So Glass-Steagall would not have done a damn thing to stop the financial crisis, which was pretty much about the securitization of loans and the loosey-goosey money policies of the Fed. It wouldn't have changed any of that. And it doesn't mean it's not a bad idea. I think it is, but for different reasons than what most people think. I don't think it would have prevented the last crisis at all. However, it might have prevented a certain amount of fraud.
What should we do if there's another situation where the banks need a bail-in or a bail-out? In Britain, they've passed a law saying the CEO of a bank that goes bankrupt can go to jail for 3 years. You should have been able to see it coming and prevent it.
Well, CEO of a bank or CEO of a corporation?
Of a bank.
Okay. I don't know if someone comes on and is do they get the new guy, do they get the last guy, do they get the first guy, do they get the guy that caused it? Certainly, I'd have to see the way that law was written because, I'm not aware of it here, but we certainly can say that there was a lot of fraud, and I believe at the highest levels. I think there was coercion from then Secretary Hank Paulson, forcing mergers that later blew up with Countrywide Financial, for example. So, he literally put a gun at their head and said, "This is what you're gonna do, or shut you down." I think that's coercion, and I think Hank Paulson should have gone to jail. I think that the CEOs of a lot of these companies that lied, Jamie Dimon and Citigroup, all of these guys, they're all crooks. I think they all should have gone to jail, and it's because of things they did, not necessarily because the bank went bankrupt. But yeah, all of these lending practices, and if you want to look at lending practices, well, who's responsible for that? Why didn't the Bank of England do something about the lending practices? Why didn't they do something about allowing fractional reserve lending that allows these lending practices in the first place? So these acts here are aimed at not at the right area. The underlying cause, which no one deals with, is the loosey-goosey policies of the Fed, of central banks in general, and of fractional reserve lending. That's where the problem is. It's human nature that banks or corporations are going to try and get a hold of those loopholes and do what they can with them. And so that's what's happened. So rather than pass a law, to put CEOs in jail for 3 years if their bank goes bankrupt, why don't they just eliminate fractional reserve lending and the conditions under which these credit conditions that blow up happen? That's what needs to happen.
The Panama Papers are showing us how extensive tax evasion is, and that was just one law firm in Panama whose documents were leaked. How big a problem is it? And would government's deficits be much smaller if everyone paid the taxes they're supposed to?
Everyone paid the taxes they're supposed to. Well, now you're getting into different rules here. Consider Italy. The tax laws in Italy are so Byzantine that no one in their right mind pays their taxes. I think people would pay their taxes if they thought the taxes were fair. In a number of countries in the EU, Italy is a big standout here. People don't think the tax situation is fair, so they go through all of these means to avoid paying them. The Panama deal is a little bit different because you actually had CEOs of banks. You had 5 leaders of 5 nations, including Iceland, who were telling the people one thing, look how bad, look how corrupt this whole system is, blah blah blah, when they're sheltering their own money, and it's actually caused the resignation of the Prime Minister of Iceland here. So these places exist because the tax laws are what they are, and people don't think they're fair. And of course, it's the bigger guys, which is why this was news, who have these means to these offshore things that the little guy doesn't. So the little guy gets screwed. The little guy has to pay the taxes, but not all of them do. Like I said, Italy is a key point here. So, but the whole system of saying, well, if everyone just paid their taxes, taxes are too damn high, and that's why people don't pay them. But, some taxes are harder to avoid than others. So, if there's ways to avoid taxes, people do, and they're cracking down. Some of these things aren't even illegal. Like, Google doesn't pay taxes. GE actually got money back. One can look at it and say, oh my God, how can this happen? But I can ask a simple question: why are there corporation taxes at all? Why are there corporate taxes at all? See, if the U.S. lowered taxes to some, small, let's assume you think there should be taxes, if the U.S. lowered them to some flat thing across the board, no exceptions, including on foreign profits, and let's say they put a flat tax of 5%, you would actually have money flowing back into the United States from overseas, especially if we taxed overseas profits higher than we did in the U.S. You find all kinds of creative ways to bring that money back here in the United States. So that's how you fix that problem. You lower taxes, and you make it apply to foreign taxes as well, and you apply the same thing across the board, no matter where the profits are. And guess what? People won't go to all of these schemes to try and avoid taxes because they won't be able to do it. So the cure to this is rather simple. I would say no tax, but that's not going to apply in this environment. But a low tax that applies to everything kind of thing on corporations, say 10%, 5%, the lower the better. You wouldn't have all of these countries doing all of these things trying to avoid taxes. Instead, you would have them trying to figure out how to make money instead of how to pay taxes.
Over 300 U.S. corporations moved their headquarters to Canada, including Burger King, after the Canadian lowered its corporate tax rate to a rate that was quite a bit less than the U.S.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the Canadian government made much more money doing it.
Yes, exactly. And the same thing would happen here if the U.S. lowered its tax rates. We would have all this stuff. Then you get into these competitive things. Other countries do the same thing. Of course, that's all good. If they all leapfrog each other, trying to be the tax haven, then we'll get to where I believe we need to be, which is zero. So, that would be a good thing. So rather than blaming these companies for trying to skirt tax laws, why don't you just fix the tax law? And for those U.S. companies that say move to Canada, trying to skirt the law, well, if the U.S. charged additional taxes on, for that, saying, okay, well, you're only paying Canada this much, well, you got to pay the rest of the U.S. Or even a tiny little bit more, then there's no incentive for companies, to head overseas. In fact, you can easily structure it so that there's negative incentive for doing that, which is what I propose. Now, imagine if we had zero tax in the U.S. and a positive tax on money earned overseas. Guess what would happen? All of these creative schemes would be trying to funnel all of the European activities back here in the United States. That's what would happen. That money would sit here in the United States rather than in bank accounts in Europe.
Mish, thank you very much for chatting with us.
Pleasure to be on.
My guest has been Mish Shedlock, editor of Mish's Global Economic Trend Analysis on mishtalk.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Comments or questions can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.